chapter 4 of The Truth About Apostates, Scientology story. I wrote this book to expose the crimes of, well, to introduce the exposure of crimes of the apostates. This is in no way a reflection on the Church of Scientology, nor am I going to hold any of the trademarks or copyrights. They're all owned by their own respective organizations. Let's begin. Chapter 4, the tax-exempt myth. One of the favorite claims that the apostates make is about the tax-exempt status of the Church of Scientology and the support of nonprofit campaigns and organizations. This is easily debunked and has been proven by court testimonies, affidavits, and actual public statements of professionals and experts in this field over and over again. So, the apostates would like to continuously attack the Church of Scientology based on some myths that they have invented, right? They didn't hear them, they invented them, about the tax-exempt status of the Church. They use it because it promotes an emotional response from people hearing it for the first time, and it generates feelings of outrage and injustice, which the common man has already has to endure. So they just tag along on the coattails of this. So in everyday life, we always get chaos and confusion and misinformation, and they're just going ahead and riding the coattails of this and pushing another myth. What does tax exemption mean? Tax exemption is a monetary exemption which reduces taxable income. Examples include exemption of charitable organizations from property taxes and income taxes, veterans in certain cross-border or multi-jurisdictional scenarios. The purpose? Because charitable organizations and religions exist to help people, and it's wrong for such important work to have to also pay the government, thereby reducing the grants and donations available to help people. How does one qualify for a tax exemption status as a charitable entity? The organization must be organized and operated exclusively for religious, educational, scientific, or other charitable purposes. Net earnings may not inure to the benefit of any private individual or shareholder. No substantial part of its activity may be attempting to influence legislation. The organization may not intervene in political campaigns, and the organization's purposes and activities may not be illegal or violate fundamental public policy. Pretty simple to understand. Well, it's pretty simple for sane people to understand. It's not simple for criminals and the corrupt to understand. So they'll make myths and they'll make rumors about how the church doesn't live up to that, but it does completely, and so on and so forth. As you'll find in the next 2 paragraphs, maybe even 3 paragraphs here, it says the Church of Scientology was awarded this status after the United States Supreme Court established it as a bona fide religious organization. This recognition was after a large investigation into Scientology and their management, beliefs, and practices, and a very thorough review of all their financial records. Everything was looked at, and then it was given this official recognition. Anything that the apostates state, they're apostates. They're not legal people, right? And they're not respectable legal people either. If they are a legal person, then they're not respectable. They're not credible. Otherwise, they would see the proof and see the evidence and see the facts and then talk based on that. The Internal Revenue Service, IRS, established after the Supreme Court's decision that they would also need to investigate the religion separate from the previous investigation by the U.S. Supreme Court, meaning they would need to decide whether or not the religion was actually able to be tax exempt or even considered at this moment in time. Interesting, huh? So on top of the Supreme Court, the church also went through its separate IRS investigation, doing the exact same thing as the Supreme Court so that they can make their own decision. Prior to this decision, the church was denied numerous times any appointment to speak with IRS officials or to submit any paperwork, and the church officials were harassed and discriminated against due to their religious beliefs and practices. Interesting, huh? The apostates spun it, and they're telling you a different story. Due to controversy, due to their income intentions, and so on and so forth. This discrimination came to an end when David Miscavige, the leader of the church, or the leader of the religion, without any other official with him, nor any appointments, showed up to the IRS headquarters and introduced himself and requested to speak with an official at the IRS about the seemingly endless stonewalling of the church's applications. Interesting. Total different spin, right? Totally different thing apostates have been saying. This was never a possible step through any other form of contact, and the IRS officials working with the church officials previously were hiding behind excuses, justifications, and reasons that they could not facilitate the church's paperwork submission request or even consider it. In fact, many IRS employees thought the church had refused to submit any documents for review, when in fact over 1 million pages were provided for voluntary review. The church provided over 1 million pages, and somehow the IRS, people in the IRS thought that we hadn't submitted any. As a Scientologist, I'm just saying my view. I think that's just like shocking. I think it's just shocking that the IRS would do that to a religion, especially mine. David Miscavige met with IRS officials and went over the paperwork submission, the financial aspects of Scientology, the management of Scientology, the beliefs and practices, and other stances of the religious philosophy. These were necessary in deciding it all. This happened over a 2-year period from 1991 to 1993. The IRS requested any and all documents concerning Scientology that even included all of their related and supported humanitarian efforts. This massive submission was done without delay. Church members then ensured that every single document was delivered and well received. In 1993, after a complete investigation into the Scientology religion and all of its aspects taken into consideration, also including the stances of those in Scientology, the official decision was made by the IRS to establish the following. We have determined you are exempt from federal income tax under Section 501A of the Internal Revenue Code as an organization described in Section 501c3. Interesting, huh? I don't think any of that was told to you. Any of that. Because they just don't tell the truth. They want to give you some random stuff, huh? Now, this other section here is going to probably blow your mind, or it's not. Maybe you're just going to brush it off as to something else, but I want to tell you this. Thus, the Church of Scientology and all supported humanitarian efforts were all awarded tax exemption by the IRS. This was all done legally and efficiently. In fact, a testimony can also be provided by now apostate Mike Rinder, as he observed this with his own eyes. This is what he says. And it is also David Miscavige who made the tax exemption by the IRS possible. It is he who personally walked into the front lobby of the IRS national headquarters and through 2 years of persistent work, ultimately brought out a peace with the IRS that had seemed impossible. But perhaps the most telling point is this. It was the IRS targeting individual Scientologists merely because they were Scientologists that motivated him the most in this endeavor. Again, he didn't take credit for this. He has told me many times that he felt it was his duty to all Scientologists to carry this off, and so they would be free to practice their religion just like those of other faiths. End of quote. That was by Mike Rinder, the guy who is now lying after stating this under penalty of perjury in the United States of America. I'm gonna leave that up to you to decide how you want to take that. This all was possible by David Miscavige for all Scientologists to have this right to express and to practice Scientology, Dianetics, and support their humanitarian efforts. This was seen as a must-do for David Miscavige as one of his first duties in taking over leadership in the Church of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard was supervising everything having to do with Scientology, Dianetics, and their supported campaigns and efforts from afar. David Miscavige was working on this solely and completely separate from Mr. Hubbard, as he was like any other Scientologist in the sense that he wanted to ensure the safety and prosperity of the religion. Interesting, huh? This is the last paragraph right here. Therefore, it should be easy to see the tax-exempt status of the Church of Scientology was legally awarded, and there was no foul play on the Church's behalf in obtaining any recognition. So what is the objection to this nonprofit status? Simply reread the legal requirements for any organization, and it's pretty obvious Scientology meets these standards in a very upfront and honest way. Maybe you think the church is making too much money, quote unquote, and all the parishioners are rich and donate millions every day. Well, let's look ahead to yet another chapter and dig into that. And probably have to go check out that other chapter. It would be chapter 5 and also chapter 6. Alrighty, get your copy today at exposingcrimes.com. See you in the next chapter.